My name is Ethan, and at 34 years old, I thought I had it all figured out. A successful career as a software engineer, a beautiful home, and what I believed was a loving, supportive family. That all changed the day I accidentally overheard my sister Megan laughing with our parents. "He's so dumb that he doesn't know we've been stealing everything from him for 5 years." The words hit me like a physical blow, shattering the foundation of trust I'd built my life upon. Before I dive into this painful story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button, and subscribe to follow my journey of betrayal and justice. I grew up in a modest suburb of Minneapolis, Minnesota, in what I always considered a typical American family. My parents, Robert and Linda, worked hard their entire lives. Dad was a store manager at a local hardware chain, and Mom taught 3rd grade at the elementary school a few blocks from our house. They weren't wealthy by any means, but they provided a stable home for me and my sister Megan, who's 5 years younger than me. From an early age, our parents drilled certain values into us: honesty, hard work, family loyalty. "Family comes first," Dad would say at least once a week at dinner. "In this world, the only people you can truly count on are your blood relatives." I internalized these lessons, believing that family was the unshakable foundation of life. This belief shaped everything about how I moved through the world, especially how I treated my parents and sister. I was always the responsible one. When Megan got into trouble in high school for skipping classes, I was the one who helped her catch up on schoolwork. When she needed a car for college, I co-signed her loan since my credit was already established. I saw these acts not as sacrifices but as investments in our family bond. My own path was straightforward. I worked hard in school, particularly excelling in math and computer science. I won a partial scholarship to the University of Minnesota, but still had to work part-time jobs throughout college to cover my expenses. I graduated with honors in computer science and landed an entry-level position at a growing tech company. Over the next decade, I steadily climbed the career ladder. By 34, I had become a senior software engineer at one of the top tech firms in the Midwest. With a salary that afforded me a comfortable 3-bedroom house in a good neighborhood and healthy retirement savings. I wasn't flashy with my success, but I was proud of what I'd accomplished through determination and hard work. Throughout my 20s and early 30s, I maintained close ties with my family. We established a tradition of Sunday dinners, rotating between my house, my parents' place, and occasionally Megan's apartment when she kept it clean enough for guests. These gatherings were the cornerstone of my social life. While I had friends from work and my recreational basketball league, family always took priority. As my financial situation improved, I naturally began to help my family. When Dad's truck broke down, I helped with the repair costs. When Mom needed dental work not covered by insurance, I wrote the check without hesitation. When Megan lost her job as an administrative assistant and struggled to make rent, I covered her for 3 months until she found a new position. These weren't one-time occurrences. Over time, financial assistance became a regular feature of our relationship. Dad would call about an unexpected tax bill. Mom would mention struggling to afford medication. Megan would need help with car repairs or credit card debt. Each time, I would step in, seeing it as my responsibility as the successful one in the family. "You're our rock, Ethan," Mom would say, patting my hand at dinner after I'd written yet another check. "We're so blessed to have such a generous son." Looking back now, there were warning signs I completely missed. Like the time I couldn't find my grandfather's vintage watch after a family gathering at my house. "Are you sure you didn't misplace it?" Megan asked when I mentioned it. "You've always been a little absent-minded." I eventually concluded I must have lost it somewhere. Or the time I noticed a significant discrepancy in my checking account and spent hours combing through statements, only to give up and assume I had made a math error somewhere. "You work too hard," Dad said when I mentioned my frustration. "Numbers get jumbled when you're exhausted." Small items would disappear from my home after family visits. electronics, collectibles, even clothing. Each time, I attributed it to my own disorganization or forgetfulness. Megan would occasionally make comments like, "For a smart guy, you sure lose track of your stuff a lot," with a laugh that I interpreted as good-natured teasing. There were also the loans that were never repaid. "Just until next month," they would say, but next month always brought a new crisis. A new need. I kept no formal record of these transactions. After all, this was family, and I trusted them implicitly. The signs were there in other ways too. The subtle shift in dynamics when money or possessions were discussed. The quick glances exchanged between my parents when I mentioned a recent bonus. Megan's increasing curiosity about my work schedule and travel plans. All breadcrumbs leading to a truth I wasn't prepared to see. The day everything changed was supposed to be unremarkable. I was returning from a 3-day business trip to Chicago a day earlier than planned. Our project had wrapped up ahead of schedule, and I decided to surprise my family by showing up for our regular Sunday dinner rather than canceling as I had initially told them I would need to do. I pulled into my driveway around 4 in the afternoon, noticing my parents' sedan and Megan's compact car already there. I had given them all keys to my house years ago, for emergencies, though they had gradually begun using them more liberally. Finding them gathered at my house wasn't unusual, especially on our traditional dinner day. As I approached my front door, I heard laughter coming from the open kitchen window. Familiar voices, animated and loud. Rather than announcing my presence immediately, I paused, fishing for my house keys while listening to the cheerful conversation, smiling at the sound of my family enjoying themselves. That's when I heard my name. "Ethan would absolutely freak out if he knew how much we've taken from him over the years," Megan's voice, clear and amused. "Remember when he spent weeks looking for that stupid watch? It fetched $800 at that pawn shop in Rochester." More laughter. My father's deep chuckle. "The best part is, he's too dumb to realize what's happening right under his nose. Smart with computers, clueless about everything else." I froze on my front porch, keys suspended in midair. Surely I had misheard. Surely this was some bizarre joke I didn't understand. 5 years we've been doing this, my mother's voice now, and he hasn't caught on once. Last month alone, I took $400 from his wallet on different occasions. And he never said a word. "That's nothing," Megan replied. "I've been using his credit card for online shopping for over a year. I just make small purchases. Spread them out so they don't trigger any alerts. He's so busy with work he doesn't even check his statements carefully." My legs nearly gave out. I leaned against the porch railing for support, my heart hammering so loudly I feared they might hear it from inside. The conversation continued, each revelation worse than the last. The silver serving set from his dining room cabinet. Dad said that was worth over $1,000. Found a buyer through my golf buddy. And he just assumed he misplaced it, Mom added, her voice tinged with something that sounded like pride. Just like with everything else. The electronics, the cash, even that expensive cologne I gave to your father for Christmas last year. We should really thank him for funding our lives. Megan laughed. Though it's getting harder to come up with excuses for needing money. What should we try next? I've been thinking, Mom said, her voice dropping slightly, though still audible through the window. What if one of us had a medical emergency? Something scary enough that he wouldn't question the costs, but nothing that would require too much evidence. That's brilliant, Megan exclaimed. He's such a sucker for a sob story, especially when it comes to family. A few thousand for specialist consultations that insurance won't cover. Dad mused. He'd never asked for receipts or documentation. Not from us. My entire body felt cold despite the warm spring day. The family I had trusted implicitly, loved unconditionally, had been systematically stealing from me for years. Not just items or money, but stealing my trust, manipulating my love for them, mocking my loyalty behind my back. His trusting nature makes him the perfect target, Megan continued. He's so desperate to be the good son, the good brother. It's almost too easy. Remember when he gave me $4,000 for those home repairs last summer? Dad laughed. Took your mother on a cruise instead. Told him the contractor didn't provide itemized receipts, and he just nodded. The best mark is someone who doesn't know they're being played, Mom said. Something cold and calculating in her tone that I'd never heard before. And our Ethan has no idea. I stood frozen, listening to them laugh about other instances of theft, other manipulations, other betrayals. Items I thought I'd misplaced. Money I'd attributed to my own poor accounting. Loans I'd given out of love, never to be repaid. The conversation eventually shifted to their plans for the dinner they assumed I would miss, discussing how they would help themselves to more of my belongings while they were there. I heard Megan mention checking my bedroom for any cash I might have left in my dresser drawers. In that moment, I made a decision. Rather than confronting them immediately in a storm of emotion, I silently retreated to my car. They hadn't heard my arrival, too engrossed in their plotting and reminiscing about past thefts. I backed out of the driveway as quietly as possible and drove away. My mind racing, my heart breaking. I drove aimlessly for nearly 2 hours, my thoughts chaotic, my emotions swinging wildly between disbelief, rage, and a profound sense of loss. Several times I pulled over because tears blurred my vision too much to drive safely. The family I thought I had, the loving, supportive foundation of my life, had never existed. It was a fiction. A careful performance designed to exploit my trust and generosity. Eventually, I checked into a hotel downtown, unable to face returning to my house while they were still there. In the anonymous quiet of the hotel room, I finally allowed the full weight of what I'd discovered to crash over me. The betrayal was total and complete. Every Sunday dinner, every phone call, every moment of what I thought was family bonding, all of it tainted by their deception. Had any of it been real? Had they ever loved me, or had I always been nothing more than a resource to exploit? As the initial shock began to subside, specific memories resurfaced with painful clarity, now viewed through a new lens of awareness. The time my high-end camera disappeared after a family barbecue. Megan had suggested that perhaps a neighbor had taken it, leading me to have an uncomfortable conversation with the family next door. Now I realized she had probably taken it herself. The collection of rare vinyl records that had gradually diminished over time. I had attributed it to loaning albums to friends and forgetting about them. Now I understood they had been systematically stolen and likely sold. The irregular discrepancies in my bank account that never seemed large enough to investigate thoroughly. $50 here, $75 there. Small enough to dismiss as my own accounting errors, but significant when accumulated over 5 years. The emergency, loans that were never repaid. Dad's unexpected car repairs. Mom's dental work. Megan's rent during her unemployment. How many of these emergencies had been fabricated? How many times had I been manipulated by manufactured crises? I pulled out my phone and began making notes, trying to quantify the theft as best I could from memory. The known items alone, electronics, jewelry, collectibles, totaled well over $10,000. Add to that the direct cash, loans, and the unauthorized use of my credit cards, and the amount could easily be 3 or 4 times that. But the financial loss, substantial as it was, paled in comparison to the emotional devastation. These were the people I had trusted most in the world. The people I had built my life around supporting and protecting. The betrayal cut to the very core of my identity and made me question every relationship I had. If my own family could deceive me so thoroughly, so callously, who could I trust? How could I ever believe anyone again? The questions circled endlessly as night fell and the hotel room grew dark around me. I considered confronting them immediately. Storming back to my house. Catching them in the act, demanding explanations. In my mind, I rehearsed fiery speeches, imagined their shocked faces, pictured them begging for forgiveness. But even in my emotional state, I recognized that such a confrontation would likely be unproductive. They would deny, minimize, gaslight. They had been manipulating me for years. They would undoubtedly have strategies ready for if they were caught. Part of me wanted to simply cut all ties immediately. Change my locks, block their numbers. Disappear from their lives as completely as they had erased my trust in them. But that approach would leave me with no closure, no justice, and potentially vulnerable to their continued attempts to exploit me. As the night wore on, my thoughts gradually shifted from the pain of betrayal to the practicalities of response. I needed to protect myself, both emotionally and financially. I needed evidence. I needed a strategy. Sometime after midnight, I called the one person I trusted completely outside my family. My college roommate and still best friend, James. Despite the late hour, he answered on the third ring. "Ethan? Everything okay?" His voice was groggy with sleep. "No," I said simply. And then the whole story poured out of me. The overheard conversation. The years of theft. The mockery. The realization that my entire family dynamic had been built on exploitation. James listened without interruption, and when I finished, his response was immediate and clear. "You need documentation. Evidence. And you need legal advice. This isn't just a family squabble. Ethan. What they've been doing is criminal." The word landed heavily. Criminal. My family, the people I had loved and supported, had been committing crimes against me for years. Theft. Fraud. Exploitation. "I know a good lawyer," James continued. "Marcus Wilson. He specializes in cases like this: elder abuse, family financial exploitation. Not that you're elderly. But the dynamic is similar. Want me to set up a meeting?" I agreed, feeling for the first time since the discovery a small sense of direction. A path forward through this nightmare. "And Ethan," James added before we hung up, "don't confront them yet. Don't let them know you're onto them. Not until you have everything in place." After ending the call, I lay awake until dawn, grieving the family I thought I had, and beginning to formulate a plan for dealing with the family I actually had. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My supervisor, concerned by the unusual request, assured me it was no problem and to take the time I needed. I then texted my family group chat, maintaining the fiction that I was still on my business trip, saying I'd be delayed returning for another few days due to project complications. Megan replied almost immediately, "That sucks. We missed you at dinner last night. Let us know if you need anything." The casual deception in her message, knowing what I now knew, made my stomach turn. But I replied with a simple, "Thanks. Will do," and forced myself to focus on the tasks ahead. James had already arranged a meeting with attorney Marcus Wilson for that afternoon. Before heading to the appointment, I stopped at an electronics store and purchased a comprehensive home security system with multiple cameras. If my family was going to continue stealing from me, I was going to catch them in the act. Marcus Wilson's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown. The attorney himself was a sharp-eyed man in his 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor that I found immediately reassuring. "James filled me in on the basics," he said after introductions. "I'm sorry you're dealing with this, especially from family. Unfortunately, it's more common than most people realize." Over the next hour, I provided a detailed account of what I'd overheard and my suspicions about previous thefts. Marcus took careful notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "What you're describing constitutes several criminal offenses," he explained when I finished. "Theft, credit card fraud, possibly identity theft depending on what else they've done. You have every right to pursue criminal charges." The thought of my parents and sister facing criminal charges was still difficult to process, despite everything. Marcus seemed to read my hesitation. "Many victims in your situation are reluctant to involve law enforcement, which is understandable. But at minimum, we need to protect you from further exploitation and seek restitution for what's been taken. We discussed a strategy that began with comprehensive documentation. I needed to audit my finances going back at least 5 years, catalog my possessions, and gather evidence of the thefts and unauthorized transactions. And most importantly, Marcus emphasized, do not confront them until we have everything in place. The moment they know you're aware of their activities, they'll start covering their tracks, denying everything, and potentially escalating their efforts to take what they can before being cut off. I left Marcus's office with a detailed action plan and a follow-up appointment scheduled for the following week. My first step was installing the security system in my home. I returned after confirming via text that my family had all left, and spent the evening mounting cameras in discrete locations throughout the house, focusing on areas where valuables were kept. The next day, I began the painstaking process of financial forensics. I requested statements for all my accounts going back 5 years. I created spreadsheets tracking every significant discrepancy, every unusual transaction, every unaccounted withdrawal. The pattern, once I was specifically looking for it, was unmistakable. Small amounts had been regularly disappearing, gradually increasing in frequency and value as the years passed. I also documented my possessions, photographing everything of value still in my home and making lists of items I now suspected had been stolen. I searched online marketplaces and local pawn shops, and incredibly, found listings for several of my missing items, including a limited edition watch I'd been given by my first boss, listed by a seller whose profile picture was obscured but whose username incorporated my sister's birth year. Over the next 2 weeks, I maintained the pretense of normalcy with my family. I returned from my extended business trip and resumed our usual interactions, though each conversation now felt like navigating a minefield. Every casual question about my work schedule or finances, I now recognized as potential intelligence gathering for their next theft. The security cameras quickly proved their worth. Within days of installation, they captured my mother entering my home while I was at work, methodically searching through my desk drawers, and pocketing several $100s in cash I had deliberately left visible. 2 days later, they recorded Megan exploring my bedroom closet, examining several designer shirts before selecting 2 and placing them in her bag. Each new piece of evidence was another knife to the heart, but also strengthened my resolve. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a one-time lapse in judgment. This was a systematic, ongoing campaign of theft and deception by the people who should have been most trustworthy in my life. During this evidence-gathering phase, I also set a trap. At our next Sunday dinner, hosted at my parents' house, I deliberately mentioned a new investment opportunity one was considering. One that could potentially double my money within 6 months. It's a significant amount, I said casually, watching their reactions. About 50,000. But the returns could be substantial. The shift in their demeanor was immediate and sickening to witness. Dad asked detailed questions about the investment timeline. Mom mentioned that they'd been considering some home renovations. Megan wondered aloud if this was the type of opportunity that could be expanded to include family members. The following day, my security cameras captured a conversation between all 3 of them in my living room while I was at work. They were discussing strategies for convincing me to either include them in the investment or loan them money to make their own similar investments. He's flush with cash right now, Dad said. We need to strike while he's feeling generous. I'll tell him my car is on its last legs, Megan suggested. He always worries about my safety. That should be good for at least 5 or 6,000. And I'll mention my arthritis is getting worse, Mom added. Say the doctor recommended a treatment not covered by insurance. Each recording, each bank statement, each inventory list became part of a growing file that I shared with Marcus during our weekly meetings. By the end of the month, we had compiled irrefutable evidence of their activities going back years. You have more than enough to pursue both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit, Marcus informed me during our most recent meeting. The documentation is thorough and compelling. What's the next step? I asked, feeling a strange mix of validation and sorrow. That depends on what you want the outcome to be, Marcus replied. Are you looking for restitution? Criminal penalties? Both? I considered carefully before answering. I want them to understand the magnitude of what they've done. I want restitution for what they've taken. And I want to ensure they can never do this to me, or anyone else, again. Marcus nodded. Then I suggest a formal confrontation, on our terms, with all the evidence presented clearly. We'll invite them to a meeting here, present the evidence, and outline their options. Which are? They can agree to full financial restitution, return all stolen items still in their possession, and sign legally binding agreements never to contact you again. Or we can proceed with criminal charges and a civil lawsuit. The plan was set. Marcus would send formal letters to my parents and sister, requesting their presence at his office the following week to discuss an urgent family financial matter. The letter would be worded neutrally enough not to raise immediate alarm, but formally enough to ensure their attendance. As I left Marcus's office that day, I felt a strange sense of calm. After weeks of emotional turmoil, of maintaining a facade of normalcy while gathering evidence of betrayal, the end was in sight. One way or another, the exploitation would stop. The week leading up to the confrontation was surreal. I continued gathering final pieces of evidence while maintaining the performance of normal family relations. Each interaction was now filtered through my new awareness, and I was stunned by how obvious their manipulations seemed once I knew to look for them. Dad called midweek, casually mentioning car trouble and hinting at needing financial assistance. Mom texted about a new medication her doctor had recommended, emphasizing its cost. Megan invited me to lunch, spending the entire meal subtly probing about my investment plans and suggesting she might need a small loan to address some credit card debt. In each case, I deflected without arousing suspicion, promising to look into it or discuss it soon. Their persistence was both fascinating and disturbing to observe with clear eyes. Meanwhile, my security cameras continued to document their activities. During a brief visit to drop off a borrowed book, Mom was captured on video opening my filing cabinet and photographing documents. Dad, while using my bathroom during a different visit, was recorded searching through my medicine cabinet and pocketing prescription medication. Megan, most brazenly, used her key to enter my house while I was at work, spending nearly an hour cataloging my possessions, opening drawers, and making notes on her phone. I shared all new footage with Marcus, who added it to our growing file of evidence. We also finalized the presentation for the confrontation, organizing the material chronologically to demonstrate the pattern of escalation over time. The psychological impact is important, Marcus explained. We want them to understand that this isn't about one incident or misunderstanding. This is about years of deliberate, coordinated exploitation. We prepared binders for each family member, containing copies of bank statements with unauthorized transactions highlighted, screenshots from security footage showing them in the act of theft, photographs of my stolen possessions listed for sale online, and transcripts of their recorded conversations discussing their methods and plans. The evidence was overwhelming, even to me who had lived through it. Seeing it all compiled, organized, and documented was like watching the systematic dismantling of my family relationship from the outside. It was no longer possible to minimize or excuse their behavior. The facts laid bare told a story of calculated, continuous betrayal. 2 days before the scheduled meeting, I had a final session with Dr. Winters, the therapist I had begun seeing shortly after discovering the betrayal. She had been instrumental in helping me process the complex emotions of familial betrayal. "How are you feeling about the confrontation?" she asked. "Surprisingly calm," I admitted. "A month ago, I was a wreck. Now I just want it over with." "That's a natural progression," she assured me. "You've moved from shock and grief to acceptance and action. But be prepared for strong emotions during the actual confrontation. They may deny, they may attack, they may break down. Any reaction is possible. We discussed strategies for maintaining emotional equilibrium during the meeting, breathing techniques, mental grounding exercises, the importance of allowing Marcus to take the lead if my emotions threaten to overwhelm me. Remember, Dr. Winters emphasized, this meeting is not about revenge. It's about boundaries, consequences, and moving forward with your life free from exploitation. I also finalized practical preparations with James, who had been an unwavering support throughout this process. He would accompany me to the meeting as both moral support and an additional witness. "What do you think they'll do?" he asked the night before, as we reviewed the presentation one final time. "Deny at first," I said, having thought about this question extensively. "Then, when faced with the evidence, minimize. It wasn't that much. We were going to pay it back. You're overreacting. And when that doesn't work, probably emotional manipulation. Tears. Appeals to family loyalty. Guilt." James nodded. "And you're prepared for all of that?" "As prepared as I can be," I replied. "The hardest part will be remembering that the family I thought I had never existed. I'll be facing strangers who happen to share my DNA." The morning of the confrontation, I woke early after a restless night. I dressed carefully in a suit I would normally reserve for important client meetings. Wanting to project confidence and control, I reviewed my notes one final time, then drove to Marcus's office an hour before the scheduled meeting. Marcus and his assistant had arranged the conference room meticulously. A large table was seating for 7: Marcus, his assistant, myself, James, and my 3 family members. A projector was set up for displaying video evidence. The binders were placed at each family member's designated seat, closed for now, their contents waiting like landmines. "We'll start with a general overview," Marcus reminded me as we waited. "Give them a chance to explain or come clean before presenting the specific evidence. Sometimes, when confronted in a formal setting like this, people will admit to their actions rather than face the humiliation of having them detailed publicly." I nodded, doubting my family would take that route but appreciating the methodical approach. "And remember," Marcus added, "you're in control here. If at any point you need a break or want to step out, just signal me. This is difficult terrain to navigate, especially with family." At precisely 10 o'clock, the receptionist announced that all 3 of my family members had arrived. Marcus nodded to his assistant, who went to escort them to the conference room. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. The door opened, and they entered, confusion evident on their faces. That confusion would soon transform into something else entirely. My family entered Marcus's conference room with expressions ranging from mild curiosity to slight annoyance. None of them had connected my absence with this mysterious meeting. They had assumed, as they had for years, that I remained oblivious to their actions. Dad entered first, glancing around with the slight impatience of someone who considered his time valuable. Mom followed, her face composed in what I now recognized as her concerned parent expression, a mask she had perfected over years. Megan came last, checking her phone until the last possible moment before looking up. Their expressions shifted simultaneously from confusion to alarm when they saw me sitting beside Marcus. James's presence added to their disorientation. This clearly wasn't the financial planning discussion they had anticipated. "Ethan?" Mom spoke first, her voice carefully modulated to convey maternal concern. "What's going on, honey? Your message said this was about financial planning." Before I could respond, Marcus stood and introduced himself. "Good morning. I'm Marcus Wilson, attorney at law. Please take your assigned seats. We have serious matters to discuss." The word attorney visibly startled them. They exchanged quick glances, the same type of nonverbal communication I had missed for years but could now read clearly as shared concern. "There must be some mistake," Dad said, remaining standing. "We weren't told this was a legal meeting." "It is indeed a legal matter," Marcus replied calmly. "Please be seated." Everything will be explained. Reluctantly, they took their places at the table, staring at the closed binders before them with growing apprehension. Marcus began with clinical precision. For the past 5 years, the three of you have engaged in a systematic campaign of theft, fraud, and financial exploitation against Ethan. Today, we will review the evidence of these activities and discuss the consequences. The reaction was immediate and exactly as I had anticipated. Denial. Shock. Outrage. That's absurd. Dad's face flushed red. Ethan, what is this nonsense? We would never steal from you. Mom added, reaching for my hand across the table. I deliberately moved it away. We're family. Megan opted for indignation. I can't believe you would accuse us of something like this. After everything we've done for you. Marcus remained unruffled. Please open the binders in front of you and turn to the first tab. They did so reluctantly, finding themselves staring at bank statements spanning 5 years, with dozens of unauthorized transactions highlighted in yellow. As you can see, Marcus continued, we have documented numerous instances of unauthorized withdrawals, unusual transactions, and discrepancies that align perfectly with your access to Ethan's home, personal effects, and financial information. He proceeded methodically through the evidence, section by section. The security camera footage played on the projector screen, showing each of them in the act of stealing from my home. The online listings of my possessions appeared next, including items I had been told were lost or misplaced. Transcripts of their own conversations planning further thefts and deceptions were presented last, including the damning conversation I had overheard that started this entire process. As the evidence mounted, their strategies shifted, just as I had predicted. Denial gave way to minimization. Those were just loans, Dad insisted weakly. We were going to pay everything back. You've always been generous with your things, Mom added. We didn't think you would mind us borrowing some items. We should have asked, but it wasn't stealing. Megan tried a different approach. This is being blown way out of proportion. So we took a few things, used your card a couple times. It's not like we cleaned you out. Family shares things. Marcus countered each attempt at minimization with specific figures. The documented theft amounts to approximately $68,000 in cash, goods, and unauthorized charges over 5 years. This does not include items we couldn't verify or potential identity theft issues still under investigation. When minimization failed, they turned to emotional manipulation, right on cue. Mom began to cry, not the genuine tears of remorse but the calculated sobs I now recognized from previous manipulations. How could you do this to us? We're your family. The only people who have always been there for you. After everything we've sacrificed for you, Dad added, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. This is how you repay us? By ambushing us with lawyers and accusations? Megan went for guilt. I thought we meant something to you. I guess money is more important than family to you now that you're successful. Throughout it all, I remained silent, letting Marcus guide the conversation. Watching the people I had loved my entire life reveal themselves fully as the manipulators they were. It was both heartbreaking and strangely liberating. When their emotional appeals failed to elicit the desired response from me, they turned to threats. This will destroy the family, Dad warned. Is that what you want? To tear apart your family over some misunderstandings about money? What will people think? Mom added. Our friends, the extended family, your colleagues. Do you want everyone knowing you dragged your own parents into a lawyer's office over a few borrowed items? Megan went further. I'll tell everyone you're paranoid. That you're having some kind of breakdown. No one will believe you over all three of us. Marcus had prepared me for this phase as well. Threats and attempts at public shaming are common tactics used by financial abusers when exposed, he interjected. They are, in fact, further evidence of the manipulation Ethan has documented. Finally, when all other approaches failed, they collapsed into desperate pleas. Please, Ethan, Mom sobbed, now with what appeared to be genuine tears. We made mistakes. We got carried away. We can make it right. We'll pay back everything, Dad promised. Just don't do this. Don't take legal action. I'm sorry, Megan whispered, her confidence finally shattered by the weight of evidence. We never meant for it to go this far. It was the first hint of genuine remorse I'd seen, though it came only after every other avenue had been exhausted. Even then, I suspected it was remorse at being caught rather than true regret for the harm they had caused. Marcus outlined their options with clinical detachment. Option 1. You agree to full financial restitution of $68,000. Return all stolen items still in your possession. Sign legally binding agreements never to contact Ethan again, and we do not pursue criminal charges. Option 2. We proceed with criminal charges for theft, fraud, and exploitation, along with a civil lawsuit for damages. The reality of their situation finally seemed to sink in. The carefully constructed facade of family unity had been shattered beyond repair. They were facing not just the loss of their source of easy money, but potential legal consequences that could include criminal records and financial ruin. After a brief private consultation among themselves, they agreed to option 1. Marcus had already prepared the necessary paperwork, which they signed with shaking hands. They would have 30 days to provide full financial restitution and return all stolen items. The no-contact agreement would take effect immediately upon signing. As they prepared to leave, each made a final attempt at connection. Dad, son, I know you're angry now, but someday you'll want your family back in your life. Mom, we do love you, Ethan. Despite everything. We just got lost somewhere along the way. Megan, I'm sorry it came to this. I really am. I had prepared a response for this moment, knowing it would likely be the last time I ever spoke to them. What hurts most isn't the money or the possessions. It's that you saw my love and trust as weaknesses to exploit rather than gifts to cherish. That's not family. That's predation. I wish you well, but we have no future together. With those words, the meeting concluded. They were escorted from the building, and I was left with the strange, hollow feeling of having lost something I had already been grieving for weeks. James placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. You did it. It's over. But we all knew that while the exploitation had ended, the real work of healing was just beginning. The weeks following the confrontation passed in a blur of legal procedures and practical arrangements. True to the agreement, my family provided full financial restitution within the 30-day window. Marcus arranged for the funds to be transferred directly to a new account I had established at a different bank, one they had never had access to. The stolen items they still possessed were returned via a third-party courier service to avoid direct contact. Some things came back as I remembered them. Others were damaged or showed signs of heavy use. Many items were simply gone forever, sold or otherwise disposed of during their years of theft. I changed the locks on my house, installed an advanced security system, and thoroughly reorganized my financial life. New accounts, new passwords, credit monitoring services, and a complete audit of all my assets. The practical aspects of protection were straightforward, if time-consuming. The emotional aftermath proved far more complex. Despite having weeks to prepare for the final break with my family, the reality of their absence left a void I hadn't fully anticipated. Sunday dinners, holiday celebrations, the casual phone calls and text messages that had structured my social calendar for years, all suddenly gone. Dr. Winters helped me navigate this strange form of grief. You're mourning multiple losses, she explained during one of our weekly sessions. The loss of the family you thought you had, the loss of the future you imagined with them, and the loss of your identity as a son and brother, as you understood it. The process wasn't linear. Some days I felt empowered by my decision to end the exploitation, relieved to be free from manipulation. Other days I was consumed by anger or plagued by doubts. Had I overreacted? Had there been another way? Could people who had deceived me for years ever have truly changed? What you're experiencing is normal, Dr. Winters assured me. When we sever relationships with family, especially under traumatic circumstances, we question ourselves precisely because family connections are supposed to be unbreakable. Society reinforces this idea, making estrangement feel like failure. Gradually, I began to reconstruct my life around new connections and strengthened existing friendships. James and his wife invited me to their family gatherings. Colleagues became closer friends as I opened myself to deeper connections at work. I joined a support group for victims of family financial abuse, finding solace in the shared experiences of others who understood this particular type of betrayal. 3 months after the confrontation, I made a decision that felt both symbolic and practical. I sold my house, the site of so much deception and theft, and purchased a smaller but more modern condo downtown. The new space had no associations with my former family life. No memories of betrayal lurking in corners. It represented a fresh start. I also reassessed my relationship with money and possessions. For years, I had measured my success largely through financial achievement and material acquisition. The betrayal forced me to question these values. While I didn't abandon my career or embrace extreme minimalism, I became more intentional about how I used my resources. I established a regular donation to a nonprofit organization that helped victims of financial abuse, particularly those exploited by family members. I volunteered my technical skills to help the organization improve their website and data management systems. Finding purpose in helping others who had experienced similar betrayals became an unexpected source of healing. 6 months after the confrontation, I received an envelope from Megan, forwarded through Marcus's office per our legal agreement. It contained a handwritten letter of apology and several photographs from our childhood, genuine moments of connection before the exploitation began. I read the letter once, acknowledged the complexity of emotions it stirred, then filed it away. It was an artifact from a closed chapter of my life, not an invitation to reopen it. By the 1-year mark, I had established what Dr. Winters called a chosen family, a network of genuine, reciprocal relationships built on mutual respect and honest connection. James and his family, colleagues turned close friends. My support group, new acquaintances who became important fixtures in my life. These relationships were different from what I had known before. I was more cautious. Yes, but also more authentic. I set clearer boundaries and communicated my needs more directly. Paradoxically, the betrayal that could have made me permanently mistrustful instead taught me to build healthier, more balanced connections. I also developed new hobbies that connected me with like-minded people. I joined a hiking club, took photography classes, and volunteered at community events. These activities not only filled the social void left by my family's absence but also helped me rediscover parts of myself that had been overshadowed by the role of reliable provider I had played for so long. The financial restitution, substantial as it was, sat largely untouched in a separate account. Using it felt somehow wrong, as if it would reconnect me to the betrayal. Eventually, on Dr. Winters' suggestion, I decided to use a portion of it to fund a memorable experience rather than replace material possessions. I took a 3-week solo journey through national parks across the country, photographing landscapes, meeting fellow travelers, and spending long hours in contemplative solitude. The trip became a personal pilgrimage, marking the transition from victim to survivor to someone defined not by what had happened to me but by how I had chosen to respond. Upon returning, I felt a sense of closure that had eluded me since the confrontation. The betrayal would always be part of my story, but it no longer dominated my narrative. It had become a chapter rather than the entire book. In reflecting on the journey, I realized that the most valuable lesson wasn't about the dangers of trust or the importance of verification, though those were certainly practical takeaways. The deeper lesson was about self-worth. For years I had measured my value by what I could provide to others, particularly my family. The betrayal forced me to recognize that true worth comes from within, not from others' validation or appreciation. I also learned that boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary for healthy relationships. By allowing my family unlimited access to my resources, both material and emotional, I had enabled their exploitation. Setting limits, saying no, requiring accountability, these aren't acts of unkindness but essential components of mutual respect. Perhaps most importantly, I discovered that family isn't defined by DNA but by consistent actions of love, respect, and honesty. The people who proved to be my true family were those who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. They celebrated my successes without envy, supported me through challenges without judgment, and engaged with me in relationships of mutual giving rather than one-sided taking. Today, 2 years after that fateful afternoon when I overheard my sister's mocking words, my life looks vastly different than I ever imagined it would. There are still moments of sadness for what might have been, but they're overshadowed by gratitude for what is, authentic connections, hard-won wisdom, and a life built on truth rather than illusion. If my story resonates with you, if you've experienced betrayal by those who should have been most trustworthy, know that healing is possible. It doesn't come quickly or easily, but it does come. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Document concerning patterns. Seek professional support. And remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and others, is to establish boundaries that protect your well-being. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect yourself from people who were taking advantage of your generosity? How did you find the strength to stand up for yourself? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of resilience and personal growth. Remember, true family treasures the trust you place in them, they don't exploit it. Thank you for listening to my journey.